My most anticipated movie of all time, The Batman, is finally out in theaters, so this is my spoiler-free review for The Batman. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Arjun, and like I mentioned, The Batman has been my most anticipated movie of this year and of all time. I was really excited for this movie, and it is finally out in theaters, and I was so excited to watch it. I saw it with a group of my friends, and we had a really good time. Before I tell you guys what I thought about the movie as a whole, let me know down in the comments if you have seen it. What did you think of The Batman? If you haven't seen it yet, are you excited to watch it? How excited are you? And what are your expectations? Were you really excited like I was? Were you someone that was optimistic but wasn't as excited as I was? Or were you someone that wasn't excited at all? I'd love to know your thoughts. With that said, I'm gonna get started talking about The Batman. Alright, so I have to be honest, after waiting this long for this movie and a day after watching it, I have to say this movie was just as good as I wanted it to be, and it really delivered on my excitement. To me, this was just a perfect Batman story, and this was the type of Batman movie I've been waiting for, because although we've seen a bunch of Batman movies before, in none of them we have really seen the detective side of Batman, and this movie entirely is really an investigation, and Batman is being a detective throughout the entire movie, and we really get to see the world's greatest detective actually doing some detective stuff in this movie, and I think he did a really good job of that. I think Matt Reeves' style works really well, and when he's telling the story with these characters, everything is executed really well, and because it's a detective story, it has to keep your interest throughout the entire movie, and at least for me, the entire movie was really fun to watch, really engaging, and the detective, the mystery stuff, all of it worked really well for me. Now, it is pretty slow. It's not a big action spectacle. Like I said, it is a detective story, and because of that, not everyone might like it. To me, it worked perfectly well, and even when the action scenes were happening, the action was actually really good. It's not an action movie. It's not the big spectacle type of superhero movies that we have nowadays. It's more slow-paced, more about the characters, more about the mystery, and because of that, it felt new, it felt fresh, and it felt different from other comic book movies. So to me, this movie was absolutely amazing, and the detective stuff worked really well for me. Now, when the action was happening, the action was absolutely amazing. I love the action in this movie, and although the Batman was a little overpowered, it made sense because all the other people, they didn't have the gadgets that he did. They didn't have the big Batman armor that he had. And they didn't have the money to build all the stuff that Batman has. So when he was fighting people, he was easily able to take them out, and it was really great to watch. And just the Batman in general, the fighting style, the action, all of it looked really great. And unlike other action movies nowadays, there's not too many quick cuts, there's not shaky cam and all that stuff, so you could actually see what's happening in the action sequences, and every single action scene was just amazing to watch. There's especially one with the Batmobile that we see in the trailers where the Batmobile is chasing Penguin. That is such a great scene. That is one of the standout moments throughout the entire movie.
I got you! I got you!
And this is easily the best Batmobile. I love the Batmobile, and it really gave me chills when I was watching the movie, and the entire theater was shaking. So I thought that was really cool. I also really like the final battle. Now, I do have a little bit of a problem with the third act, which I will get into, but I really like the final battle. It is a little short. I would have liked it to be longer, but the action itself was really cool. The way it was framed, the way it was shot was really great, and there's some really cool visual moments in it. So I absolutely loved the action in this movie. Like I said, I think Matt Reeves' direction and storytelling style works really well for this movie. It's slower paced, more about the characters and the story, and I think it works really well. And even in the action scenes, the way he shoots them was great, but the entire movie, you could really feel the type of movie it was. It was more of a noir mystery story, and because of that, the way Matt Reeves was able to execute it, I think worked really well, and throughout the entire movie, it just had me engaged, and I was just... It was great. I absolutely loved it. It is also a really dark movie because Matt Reeves makes it feel really dark and brutal, and I honestly wouldn't have been surprised if this movie was R-rated, because when I was watching it, there were so many moments that if a kid saw that, they would be scared. They would be maybe even traumatized, because it is dark, it is brutal, and even in the action sequences, you have a Batman who's just beating up people really, really badly, and you have the Riddler. Some of the things they do with the Riddler is scary, and it even feels like a horror movie at times, which Matt Reeves and some of the people that worked on the movie actually said that there's things about this movie that feel like a horror movie, and this is, I would say, probably the scariest comic book movie I've seen, both from the Riddler side and the Batman, because both of them have some really scary moments, and I think it works incredibly well. I absolutely loved the vibe and how dark this movie felt. So if it was R-rated, I wouldn't have been surprised. I'm actually surprised it's not R-rated, because there's so many things that did feel really dark. I think the movie also had beautiful cinematography. I think on a visual standpoint, this is easily the best Batman movie. It looks beautiful. It's also one of the best looking comic book movies, just in general, not just Batman. It looks beautiful. Every single shot in this movie, you could just screenshot it and make it your wallpaper. That's how beautiful it looks. And right now, my phone's wallpaper, my computer's wallpaper, and even my watch face is the Batman. So I absolutely love the cinematography in this. It looks beautiful. And it's one of the best looking movies I've seen in a while. But especially in comic book movies, probably the best looking comic book movie I've ever seen. I also absolutely loved Michael Giacchino's score. They've been releasing bits and pieces of the score online, and I actually listened to the entire soundtrack that they released, which was like 2 hours long, before watching the movie. But when I watch it, and when I actually watched the movie and heard the soundtrack, the score, in context of the movie, it was even better. And I think I'd go as far as saying this might be my favorite Batman score. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Danny Elfman, and his score for the Batman 1989 movie was great. And I absolutely love Hans Zimmer. He's my favorite composer, and his score for the entire Dark Knight trilogy is amazing. I think this score might be better because the way it fit the movie was great. It felt dark. It felt really brooding, and it really fit the movie really well. And when I was listening to it, it actually had a lot of emotional weight to it. So I think the score for this movie might be the best Batman score yet, and one of the best comic book movie scores in general. So I think on a technical level, the cinematography and score for this movie were amazing, and even the costume design, all the different things, it was great. Now, of course, we gotta talk about the characters. You have Catwoman in the mix, who I think was really good. Selena Kyle is a really fascinating character, and I think in this movie, she gets the best character, because we have seen Catwoman before with different actors, but here, she's working with Batman throughout the movie, and I think she was really, really good. And I think Zoe Kravitz played her really, really well. She's a really good actress, but just the way she played the character, the way she was able to portray the emotions that she was feeling, I thought was incredible. And she's easily the best Catwoman that we've had so far.
You got a lot of cats.
Never think about strays.
Now, it is an actual detective story, so we have to talk about the actual detective in the mix, who is obviously Commissioner Gordon. And I think Jeffrey Wright is really good as Commissioner Gordon, and the way he played the character was really fun, and his back and forth with Batman was great, and you could really tell that they've had a relationship working together, and you could tell that they actually really like each other and like working with each other. And throughout the entire movie, when they were actually investigating stuff, it was really cool to watch, and their relationship, I think, was one of the best parts of the movie, because they are really front and center throughout the whole thing. Now, Alfred is in the movie for a little bit, played by Andy Serkis, of course, and honestly, he didn't make much of an impression on me because he's not in the movie too much. I would have loved to see more of him. When he was on screen, he was really good. I think Andy Serkis played him really well. And I really loved the relationship between him and Bruce. I just wish that we got to see more of him, because he's not really in the movie too much, because mostly in this movie, it's a detective story, and you just have Batman working with Gordon, and you even don't see that much of Bruce Wayne in there. So for that reason, I understood why Alfred wasn't in as much, but I would have loved to see more of him. As of right now, I wouldn't put him at the top of Alfred's. He's probably the weakest Alfred, because we just haven't seen enough of him. And then you have Colin Farrell's Penguin. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've really seen Colin Farrell in anything. So when I saw him in this movie, he was really, really good. And then when I looked at him online, he looks like a completely different person. So Colin Farrell in this movie was absolutely amazing. I love seeing Colin Farrell in here, and he is probably just the most fun, lighthearted character out of all of them because he's kind of this mob boss, but he has a really nice sense of humor, and his personality, I think, works really, really well in this movie to complement how dark it actually is. He kind of adds moments of levity in there, so I thought that was really fun. He's also getting his own spin-off series, and I could definitely see why. The way he ended off in this movie, I think he does have a really interesting character going forward, so I'm really excited to see his series. And finally, you have the villain of the movie, the Riddler. And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't expecting to like the Riddler as much as I did. He, other than Joker, is easily the best Batman villain. He was amazing. He was smart, he was scary, and the different moments that he had throughout the movie and his interactions with the Batman was just amazing. He's probably the smartest comic book movie villain we've ever seen because the way he has everything pre-planned and everything is just great. I'm not going to get too much into him, but there's some moments with him that was just straight up terrifying. But he also has this motivation, kind of makes sense. It makes sense, and you could see something like this happening in real life. So I thought that the Riddler was a great villain in this movie. And because you kind of have a mystery tone, he fits it really well because Batman is doing detective work throughout the whole thing, and Riddler is a perfect villain for that. Okay, now let's talk about the big one, Robert Pattinson as Batman. And I don't want to say this yet because I've only seen this movie once, and it's just one movie, but I think Robert Pattinson is probably my favorite Batman. I absolutely loved him as Batman, and he was just so good at portraying the brokenness and how depressed Batman actually is, and you see that through his portrayal, and I think he did a beautiful job of portraying the character, and throughout the entire movie, I just loved how great he was as the character. He doesn't really have too many lines, he doesn't say too much throughout the movie, but just through his eyes, just through his expressions, he can portray so much emotion, and the entire movie, he did that so well. And he also had this intimidating presence, so whenever he's on screen, the other characters are kind of scared of him, and I think that's the kind of Batman we all want to see. He's scary, people are afraid of him, and you see how Gotham is affected by this guy because Gotham is a really bad place, really dark place. And whenever Batman shows up, people are terrified of him. And I think that's just such a great way to show Batman. And he's definitely the Batman that we've seen that is just terrifying, and everyone, whenever they see him, they're just scared of him, and I absolutely loved the way that Matt Reeves was able to portray that. I also think Robert Pattinson, like I said, his acting was really good, his facial expressions, all that stuff was great, but when you see him as Bruce Wayne, you don't really see the playboy, billionaire, philanthropist type guy. You don't see that from this Bruce Wayne, because Bruce Wayne is usually just fun, and he kind of hides his broodiness from people because he doesn't want anyone to know that he's Batman. But here, he's just shy. He's just scared. He doesn't talk to people when he's Bruce Wayne. He's just kind of there and stands around, looks at stuff, and observes everything. And you don't really see that fun side of Bruce Wayne. And if you wanted to see that, I can understand why that could be an issue for some people. To me, it worked really well. I loved seeing this Batman that's actually broken, and whenever he's Bruce Wayne, he's not fun. He's not fun to hang out with. He's not this guy that's just running around with people and giving people money and all that stuff. He's not that. He doesn't care about being Bruce Wayne. He only cares about being Batman, and whenever he is out as Bruce Wayne, he's doing Batman things. So personally, I really love this take on the character, and eventually I do think we'll get to see the more fun Bruce Wayne, but for this movie, the type of story they were telling, I think Robert Pattinson did just a phenomenal job, and I think I would say he's probably my favorite Batman so far. I also have to say, DC has been on a roll lately. Last year, they came out with Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was my favorite movie of last year, and they also came out with The Suicide Squad, which was absolutely amazing, and this year, they had Peacemaker, which I loved, and I think it's even better than The Suicide Squad. And then now you have The Batman, which I loved so much. It's been my most anticipated movie, and it really, really delivered on my excitement. I absolutely loved it. So props to DC. As much as I've loved the Marvel movies over the last couple of years, I don't think they've been on par with DC. Other than Spider-Man No Way Home, there's none of the other Marvel movies I would say are as good as The Suicide Squad, Zack Snyder's Justice League, Peacemaker, and The Batman. So I really, really love this movie, and I think it's definitely one of the top comic book movies we've gotten over the last few years. Now, I do have some tiny nitpicks and issues throughout the whole thing. Like, Batman does feel like he's just unbeatable. He's just, like, pretty much immortal throughout the entire movie. And that's kind of, I don't think that worked 100%, but I was okay with it for most of it because it made sense for the story. And I could understand why other people wouldn't like how slow it was. To me, it worked. To me, everything in this movie worked really well, other than one scene, which I'll talk about in a minute. But as a whole, I think it worked really well and I absolutely loved it. Now, there's one scene with the Riddler in Arkham, which I thought was kind of unnecessary. I think that could have been taken out of the movie, and this movie would have been, I would say, flawless. I would have said it was perfect, but I wish that scene was taken out. But other than that, it worked. I think this movie could even be Oscar nominated. I think it was that good. I absolutely loved it. So to me, it just worked really well. Now, there is a point in the movie where it feels like it should kind of end. It feels like the movie came to its natural conclusion, but it just keeps on going. And I have to say, it didn't bug me too much after I actually finished the movie because it made sense to me the way they did it. But when I was in the middle of the movie, and when I checked the watch, I was like, well, the story pretty much ended. What are they going to do for the next 40 minutes of the movie? So I was kind of confused because of that. But by the time the movie ended, everything made sense. So I did really like the way everything played out in this movie. Other than the one scene with Riddler in Arkham. I won't spoil anything. But I wish that scene was taken out. Then this movie would have been, I would say, perfect. Now, is it the best Batman movie? I don't know yet, because you have The Dark Knight, which is absolutely amazing. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. So I love The Dark Knight, and I've seen that movie a bunch of times, and I've seen this movie once, and as much as I love it, I don't know if I could say it's better than The Dark Knight after watching it and processing it for one day. So I need a little more time to know for sure which one I prefer. But as of right now, The Dark Knight and The Batman are definitely at the top for me as Batman movies. Definitely two of the best comic book movies ever made. I loved both of these movies so much. And the fact that I'm even comparing it to The Dark Knight is really surprising because I had sky-high expectations for this movie. I was really set up for disappointment, but it didn't disappoint me. It was as good as I wanted it to be. So I'm so glad I loved this movie as much as I did. Now, there are also different types of movies. One's more of a big blockbuster, one's more of a detective story, but still, I absolutely love both of these, and this is definitely in the conversation as one of the best comic book movies ever made. Now, before I give you guys my final score, I want to say this. I have not given many movies A+s in my entire life. There's probably like 10 movies that I've given A+s to, and on top of that, I don't think I've ever given a movie A+ and a 10 out of 10 on an entertainment scale. There's only probably like 5 or 6 movies that I've done that to. So, going into this final score, just keep that in mind. I have not given many movies A+s, and especially since I started my YouTube channel, I haven't given one movie an A+ on this YouTube channel, because since then, there's just nothing that came out that I was like, oh my god, that deserves an A+, and even 10s out of 10s, I haven't given that too much. So with that being said, I'm going to give this movie an A+. On an entertainment scale, it is a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love this movie. Other than that one scene, I think the entire thing worked really, really well. And I cannot believe how good this movie was. I saw it once and I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to see it again. And I hope it gets even better. Because as of right now, it is one of the best comic book movies for me. And it's definitely one of my favorite movies. And it's up there with The Dark Knight. I cannot believe that I'm saying that. Because it was just absolutely incredible and it made me so happy. Because of how excited I was, I even teared up a couple of times in the theater because I couldn't believe I was finally getting to watch this movie. And I did watch it and I loved it so much. So yeah, to me, The Batman was absolutely amazing. And I cannot wait to see this again. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you have seen The Batman, let me know down in the comments. What did you think? If you haven't seen it yet, how excited are you to see it? And keep it spoiler-free because this is a spoiler-free review. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
The hell are you supposed to be?
I'm vengeance.